Hello everyone, and welcome to round 5 of our June 1v1 tournament. This time we've got Lyle subbing in for Kingmorgan, also known as Ziller to those of us who hang out in twitch.tv. And then of course Dermas is here once again playing for us. His opponents are continually people we haven't seen, so that's how Dermas kind of keeps ending up on the list here. Although next game, I imagine, should be 2 new players, just trying to fit everybody in this round-robin format. Let's get to talking about the game itself because, man, prices are high this game. We've got power, we've got food, oxygen, fuel, aluminum, steel, and electronics, all ridiculously expensive this game, and then some cheap carbon for the time being, right? Not a big deal there. Both players throwing down pretty similarly timed, so not too much of a production advantage on over to Lyle, who did found first this game as expansive. Dermas is going to be taking a location that he deems good enough for scientific, a small little patch of water nearby, probably big enough to get the job done. But then what I really like is these 3 steel mills. Even without the triangle ready to go, those are still going to be a lot of steel early in the game. And that's very nice to see because steel, as we stated, started so expensive. Those life support resources also started expensive. So scientific this game could be quite interesting to see. Now, the question for Dermas is, what does he do HQ2? Does he go reactors or does he go farms? And I think he's going to want to lean farms this game because power started so expensive. And those reactors, of course, they take a lot of power. A lot of power. I like this move out of Dermas, although it's kind of an interesting one, but it's important to point out. So what he's doing with these 3 tiles, he's taking a water pump, and that's just fine. Water pump, totally understandable right now, just for some quick cash, while you don't have the glass to actually get all those farms down. But he takes these 3 tiles first. That allows him to get this water pump down, block off his opponent from the close medium water that maybe he would like to take out of spite, so it blocks off the good water tile. And then he takes these extra tiles here, which blocks off any potential adjacency from these 2, and it's just a way of discouraging Lyle from taking any of those water tiles that Dermas wants, because it would be quite tempting to take them even if they're a little bit weak, because it blocks off the scientist from having access to that easy life support. Farms down now for Dermas across the board. I don't really like having gotten rid of this water pump instead of just putting the farm here, because then that just ended up as a dead tile for a while. He could have gotten a little extra water production out there, and I think that's always going to be worth it. Even if all that water does is simply go to stop a couple hundred debt, still better than not having done it. Doesn't cost you anything. Just something to consider. Unless power was already so expensive that running the water pump was actually that expensive, which is a possibility. Okay. Power just keeps going up and up and up. It is worth noting that there were labs at the colony, and interestingly enough, that manages to hit one of the resources that started at a normal price of 80 rather than its double price at 160. So those aren't going to come into play for a while. Mars Quake. That's interesting. Players both buying heavily into resources in response to that. Both of them, in fact, grabbing up a lot of aluminum, and Dermas is not going to be happy about that. His aluminum production only just now starting to come online. Oh, and there's an aluminum tile auction. Are you actually serious right now? In a lot of ways, despite the fact that both players have some amount of aluminum stockpiled, we are basically looking at the true price of aluminum, because they're going to want to hold on to that in order to be able to push to this upgrade. Now the question is, do they identify what's going on? How much aluminum each of them has? When they're going to want to use it? When they're going to want to dump it? And then how much can they actually pull off of this tile? How valuable is this? Is it worth the fuel price, which is already starting to get a bit expensive? It's all very complicated figuring out how much this auction is actually worth. Lyle is going to take it for 16,000, and I honestly can tell you I have no idea if that's actually any good.
A scientific HQ has been upgraded.
Well, Dermas is going to use that aluminum to upgrade pretty fast. Lyle chose to sell down, but I don't know what he's going to do with that cash except just buy up aluminum again. He can't really invest it anywhere significant right now. There are no claims to purchase off the black market as an example. All he can really do is make small purchases on the black market, but nothing's all that expensive, so he's just got a bunch of cash sitting around at this point. And cash, as it turns out, is worthless. Cash isn't doing anything for you, right? Cash is the worst kind of thing you can possibly have in this game. You can turn it into just about anything. But it, in and of itself, does not gain value. And everything you're doing in Offworld Trading Company, right, you're making investments. That's what you're doing. You have to actually invest cash into something for it to actually do anything. Now what Lyle has done is he's invested a lot of cash into water. But I honestly can tell you I have no idea what the purpose of this was, because Dermas, he's not consuming water. He's just got a little bit of water consumption going on. It partially kind of increases Dermas' debt a little bit, but I really don't agree with having sold out of that aluminum for Lyle, as basically all he did with that cash was eventually pushed to an upgrade, and now he has a bunch of cash once again sitting around doing nothing. He still hasn't invested it properly. This whole time, he could have more easily taken an upgrade. If he just hadn't sold down the aluminum, it would have been more obvious to him perhaps that that's what he could and should have done. And now he's going to be looking to use this upgrade, get production online, but he's already in so much debt right now. And I'm very concerned for him at this point. The mutiny is nice on the geotherm. That's going to be pretty solid. Now both players are in large amounts of debt because power has gotten up to $300. This is why I'm nervous about these reactors. I mean, look at this. Yeah, they're making good money, but they're also adding a lot of debt. I'm not saying the reactors are a mistake. What I am saying is these players need to be careful. I'm enjoying these geothermal plant mutinies. Right now, Dermas not able to take them back himself, it would appear. And so Dermas is left with no power production. Lyle has it instead. Even has a little solar panel on his aluminum tile. That's why I was a little nervous about this. He'd paid 16,000 debt, so we can try and pay through his debt. That doesn't seem all that effective to me. Virtual reality, I mean, Pleasure Dome's gonna be pretty valuable this game. Expansive and scientific. That's going to be all right, but the immediate debt is something I would be so concerned about. You're starting to look at maybe pushing to D for these players before debt ticks, and that's something they absolutely cannot afford. Dermas in particular is in danger of falling out of this. He's in D already. He's choosing to buy shares in himself, which is, they're cheap right now. So it's an understandable decision, but I don't think it's actually going to be the correct one moving forward. I'm very, very concerned about him being in D levels of debt right now. He's going to actually sell out once again. I think he needs to upgrade before this debt tick hits. That'll increase his assets. You can see it immediately pushed him back to C for just a moment, but it did push him back to C. I think he needs to be at that C level when debt actually comes in, and I'm very, very concerned for Dermas at this point because he got the power online. He paid the money to get that going, but then he didn't actually get any benefit off of the first 2 minutes of each of his geothermal plants, right? He was not able to secure those. He went for an EMP instead of mutinying back, and now Lyle has managed to get to the point where he only has $40,000 debt. He's very, very cleanly in that AA rating. Dermas, let's watch this tick. $46,000 of interest. Interest, that game. I mean, he's HQ4. He's got everything going his way right now. Leading the upgrades as a scientist. That's very nice. Has power production online when power is expensive. That's very good. Life support is still expensive. That's fantastic. Steel's doing fine as well. But he has $200,000 of debt. $200,000 of debt. That's going to be really hard to pull back from. Absolutely. Alright, well, let's go ahead and see what happens. Dermas is using this as an advantage right now. He's trying to get what he can out of it by going ahead and committing into his stock. You can see he's got a lot of cash compared to Lyle in a lot of ways. Like, he's 50,000 cash up, which is great. He just has this problem of being so much further in debt. So what he's trying to do now is he's purchasing stock for the purpose of just having it ready to go. Kind of helps prevent that majority buyout. He also gets it while it's cheap, but he's being a bit indecisive about the whole matter. Man, Dermas wants to clean this up now. That is bold. I don't actually mind the decision all that much. Dermas realizes the massive hole he's gotten into, right? So he needs to find some way to dig himself out of the hole. The most effective way to pay down your debt is honestly to win the game, right? If you win the game, the books are wiped clean. You don't have to care anymore. You've got it done, not a problem. And you can see Dermas, he's already 2/3 of the way there. Lyle hasn't even started defending himself yet. Dermas needs 2, Lyle needs 3 in order to secure himself. And so this is an interesting decision. The question is, does Dermas have the consistent production in order to pull this off? You can see he's having to make a couple of transitions here and there, which is good. It's good that he's making these, I think. He's getting into a water pump and a farm. I think these are the correct decisions, but I am quite concerned over the fact that he's got these wind turbines online that are doing nothing for him. That's very, very concerning. He's got these steel mills, which just get worse by the moment. These water pumps will be a nice boost, but is it going to be enough is the question. Lyle is the one that seems to be effectively making money right now. He's also got a transition into glass going on.
The black market is open for business.
And I actually have no idea how this game is going to pan out, but it's looking very, very good for Dermas. Now that this transition is done, EMP comes out. EMP comes out. This is important, but this is where the scientific bonus really comes into play, right? Lyle spent a fair amount on that EMP, I think between 5,000 and 7,000, depending on exactly how things are panning out. Probably about 5,000 for that EMP for Lyle. So it's not too expensive. It does stop a lot of Dermas income, but not for very long, because Dermas, as that scientific player, has that extra defense against those electric attacks of the EMP and the power surge. And so you can see most of his production already back online. Lyle, one more. It all comes down to this one. Has it been enough? Did he slow down Dermas enough with that EMP? So far, it's looking good. Lyle's got the advantage right now. I am concerned in some ways about this chemical refineries coming online, because that's steel that could be sold down. But if he gets them online, he's going to have it. And so far, things are looking really good for Lyle. Dermas just isn't quite pushing there just yet. These steel mills sitting around uselessly, not making a whole lot of money right now. Lyle gets the defense, and I honestly think that's probably the game right there, but we will see how everything plays out. That was close.
Your stock is being sold.
Ooh, that's a bold move from Lyle, or from Dermas, excuse me.
HQ has been upgraded.
Dermas, he does still have a shot here, and we'll talk about why. So Dermas, now he's in a position where he can buy, just sell out of Lyle's stock. That money isn't gone. It was just wasted for that period of time where he was attempting to buy Lyle. But it's not truly wasted at this point, because what he's done is forced Lyle to also commit large amounts of money to defending himself, and Lyle hasn't sold out of that. So that's like $75,000 just sitting around that Lyle doesn't have, that he would like to at this point. So that's a nice thing for Dermas. Dermas also is HQ 5, Lyle's 4. My big concern, once again, it's this $250,000 debt at this point. Lyle selling out of his stock. I definitely like this move right now, as long as he's doing something with this money. And I'm actually wondering how much Lyle needs to finish up this game. If he were to buy everything that remains, he would actually need a lot of cash in order to pull that off. We're looking at almost 400,000 right now to finish up this game. So he's not really close to that. So I don't know exactly how I feel about buying into Dermas right now. I feel like Lyle is going to want to... We can check Offworld prices. Offworlds are fine this game. So I feel like what you want to do as Lyle in this position is take that cash out of your stock, because you're not afraid of dying, right? You push to 5, and you try and get those Offworlds down. You try and start really powering through on that expansive advantage. And then you'll be in a good spot. I'm not too sure about this 40,000 that's just sitting here in Dermas right now, especially because, as we can see, Dermas' price just keeps going down for the time being. So I don't know if this was worth it, even though he picked them up before Dermas was able to secure them himself. Just something to consider. And this is the big thing about being so deep in debt, right? It's so difficult to pull yourself out of this hole. Lyle's actually selling out now, although, you know, that just means it was wasted money, right? He just lost money in that investment because Dermas has been gradually becoming less valuable. Teleportation picked up for Dermas. He's trying to stick in this one. Lyle has virtual reality and water engine, which is actually going to be helping him a lot. I mean, look at all this transportation that Lyle has right now, so it's actually nice for him to have that water engine. Excuse me, virtual reality. Not really getting any benefit out of that just yet. I'd like to see him, now that he is 5, go ahead and commit to that Pleasure Dome, but he's already used all his claims, so that's not really going to be an easy option for him this game, unfortunately. Thinking machines is interesting. Lyle, I don't think, is thinking this through all that much. Doesn't need thinking machines this game. Let's just be honest. Dermas. Now, if he's just pushing that up to increase the price for Dermas, I think that's fine. And that's actually a decent move, a solid move, right? I was just a little bit concerned that he would actually try and take it. And it's like, Lyle doesn't want thinking machines. Lyle wants Dermas to have 20,000 more debt, sure. But he doesn't want thinking machines. Because when's Dermas going to ever attack him? Dermas is $369,000 in debt. You know what Lyle wants this game is financial instruments. That'd pay for itself in one tick and then some. Now, Lyle is forced into a position of having to defend himself right now. As long as he's been careful with his money as he's moved forward, he'll be okay. The problem is he built this Offworld market. That wasn't a very careful decision, unfortunately. And so Dermas doesn't quite have enough to finish it, but he has enough to be scary. That said, Lyle is being pretty scary too. He's already got 4 out of 6 of Dermas stock. As long as Lyle can push to this 5th, which it does look like he'll be able to do, he'll still be in a great spot here on the back of this off-world market that he's got online, which isn't as valuable as he'd like because on-world prices are so high, but it's still just fine. Let's see, got plenty of solid on-world production going. The reactors, maybe not super necessary. I'm concerned about the fact that Lyle didn't take 3 water pumps. He definitely needs 3 water pumps this game. No doubt about that in my mind. I'm not so sure about the steel triangle, for example, up against a scientist who's like on the back foot, unable to transition off-worlds. Or sorry, the steel diamond. This could be a triangle maybe, with water here as an example. Maybe not so many farms. It's just like small things like that can actually make a pretty big difference. Because you can see one of the reasons Lyle isn't making as much money as he'd like to is because these farms aren't even going to be making a whole lot. Because this water price is so high. Once the adjacency comes online, they'll be a bit better. But only 50 apiece. If one of these was instead just a water pump, he'd be in a much, much better position. But he can't knock this water price down very effectively, even with these low tiles over here. I really do think this should be a triangle at the moment. Just your expansive up against scientific. Scientific doesn't care about that high water price. He's never going to help you knock it down at this stage of the game. You need to be able to do that yourself. $400,000 of debt to $200,000 of debt. We know who has the advantage there, of course, because we can just see the stock price difference playing a huge, huge role this game. Lyle only needs 200 in the bank to clean this up. Dermas instead is looking at 3. Lyle has about 170. Dermas only has about 30. I'd say it's all over except for the fat lady singing at this point. We're just waiting for Lyle to go ahead and clean things up. Dermas has been doing an excellent job trying to hold on, but after his initial aggressive gambit didn't pay off, I think the game was effectively, as long as Lyle was able to close out the game properly, then Dermas really had no chance of coming back. Now, Offworld is complicated enough that Lyle definitely had a chance of misplaying it, and I was a little bit scared for him when this Offworld got built in particular, that maybe because he had sold out of his stock in order to build the Offworld and get upgraded and such, Dermas would have a chance to like sneak in a majority, but it was not meant to be. Now, Dermas, it looks like, is trying to pay down debt, trying to hold on. But of course, that just means he's not gaining any cash, and Lyle is still going to be able to eventually clean it up. That's an interesting game. We've had a variety of different games today, guys. That one was just a pure debt slugfest at the end. Very interesting to see. I think we talked about what we need to talk about, so we're not going to look over the charts too much. We can just check out Black Market. Very low Black Market game. Not too surprising with one player in D debt the entire time and the other player being a scientist, but still potentially worth pointing out. Now, power purchased and sold. You look at it and think, oh, that's not too bad. But of course, what matters is when this power was purchased and sold. And we can go ahead and glance at the balance sheet to see, oh, that's not a good number. That's not a good number at all. And that was Dermas' big problem this game. Just those interest charges from being in so much debt so fast. But it all goes back to, think if Dermas had, instead of building 2 geotherms, built 1 geotherm and gotten the goons or mutinies that he needed to defend it, right? He could have even claimed the second and just not built it. And I think Dermas runs away with it from that point. But just that black market misstep kind of forced how the rest of the game, the direction the game went. And once he was along that path, he tried to do his best to follow it. Maybe if he had touched up 1 or 2 things here and there, that could have made the difference, because we saw the majority buy was so close. It was so close. So it was just those small little things from that point forward. But the whole situation could have been avoided, I think, if just black market had been a little bit more effective.